So good to see y'all again so very quickly. Thank you so much for joining us for our last session today. I hope you have enjoyed your day so far. If you can, let's take a moment to just kind of think about what we have learned over the course of the day, things that have stood out to us during our time together. And if you can just head to the chat box and let us know what are some takeaways or some aha moments that you have had today. And as you do that, I am also going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. For this session, I want you to get ready to turn up the volume and join us for the grand finale of today's lineup. Don't Stop Believing in Snuggles, Harmonizing Felt Safety Through Toddler Tumult, led by our very own Heather Pugh. This electrifying session is here to rock your world. We understand that navigating the tumultuous terrain of toddlerhood can sometimes feel like being in the midst of a wild guitar solo. But fear not, because in this session, we're here to groove together through the ups and downs, fostering connection, co-regulation, and addressing those challenging behaviors head on. Heather Pugh brings her A game to the stage, equipping caregivers and professionals with the tools to navigate the intricate jams of child development. From epic tantrums to unforgettable meltdowns, we're here to remind you that nobody expects perfection. It's all about finding harmony in the chaos and riding the waves of highs and lows in the rocking world of early childhood. So tune in, turn it up, and get ready for a lively gig where laughter meets learning. Together, we'll jam out, celebrate successes, and keep believing in the power of Snuggles to harmonize felt safety, even in the most tumultuous of time. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Miss Heather Pugh. Take it away, Heather.
Excellent. Thank you, Jaira, for leaning into the many metaphors that you all will hear today. So, hey, hi, hello. If you did not see my first slide, I'm Heather. I am the infant mental health training specialist here at First 3 Years. And I am coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas to close us out this afternoon. As you will note from the introduction and the title, I've just been in a space where I have really been leaning into being playful, and I love incorporating that in my work when I can. I think we're all still kids at heart, and I wish that we took more time to just be silly. Throughout the presentation today, you're going to see some song titles on some slides. I've italicized them that just really embody the concept of what we're talking about. So buckle up. We've got some metaphors. I hope that you get a sense of some neural nostalgia with some of these songs as well. And we're just going to go ahead and hop right in. So a very quick overview of what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking really high-level brain development. I'm not going to get too in the weeds because I know that you guys have heard a lot of that already. We're going to put our detective hat on and kind of slow down and take a pause. And then we're going to wrap up by refocusing on caregiver capacity because we know there's no such thing as baby in isolation, right? So thank you for being here on a Friday afternoon. No matter where you are, if you're in Texas, I hope the weather's okay for you. I have narrowly scaped by so far. So anyway, let's get into it. So we're going to start with some foundation building, and I have a fun fact for you. So if you take nothing else from today, I want you to remember this. If you took a sand grain size piece of the brain, there would be around 1 billion neural synapses. So that means that, well, first, my brain can literally not even fathom that kind of number. But also there is a lot happening up here all of the time. And so just remember that every little experience matters. So What do children need? They need all of these things. These are all things kiddos need in early childhood to thrive, but also these are capacities that we need in adulthood, right? We need to be able to build relationship. We need to be able to focus on a task. We need to be able to manage our own feelings, whether they're positive or uncomfy. So how do we get there? Starting from birth, babies learn who they are and everything about the world around them by how they're treated. And relationships really are the vehicle in which all development happens. And these loving relationships provide very young children with a sense of comfort, safety, and confidence. Again, back to the last slide, we need confidence, right? We're starting early. Relationships also teach very young children how to form friendships, communicate feelings, and deal with hard stuff. We learn self-esteem and self-worth through these consistent, predictable serve and return interactions, right? So babies are saying, I have a need and you meet it, and that makes you pretty cool. These relationships also help build the foundation for all of our executive function skills, which really have to do with motivation, attention span, and impulse control, which is really what we need for school readiness and in adulthood, right? We need to be able to plan. We need to be able to just sit and listen. And we need to be able to hopefully collaborate interdisciplinary in these interdisciplinary groups of other professionals. For any kiddos that struggle in any of these areas, I start to get curious about the caregivers and wonder if they struggle in any of these too, right? What did the caregivers perhaps not receive when they were little? What are they struggling to model for their little ones? So let's talk 10,000 foot view of brain development. So brains are built over time from the bottom up and inside out, kind of like a tree. And through the interactive experiences that we're having and the influence of genes in our body, we really are shaping the developing brain, and we're strengthening those connections through repeated experiences, right? When you think about like a habit, you've got to do it over and over and over and over until it sticks. This is the same for learning new things and experiencing new things. But as we start to get older, the brain's capacity for change really starts to decrease, which is why the 0 to 3 period of development is considered a critical one, because 85% of core brain architecture is pretty much built by the time you hit preschool age. This is why prevention and early intervention are so crucial. But we can't talk about any sort of development without talking about stress, because it is inevitable and it is just a part of life. It is inescapable. And so when you think about stress, a lot of the times we're thinking about toxic stress, which is us kind of staying in fight or flight for long periods of time, which damages the developing brain architecture, because the stress hormone cortisol starts pumping through our body, and it can literally start to rewire the brain. And it then really transforms the brain into operating out of fear, honestly, to survive, which can then lead to lifelong problems in learning, behavior, physical and mental health, because we are just trying to stay alive. And so I don't care about learning. I don't care about using my words. I don't care about trying to walk, because I'm just trying to be. So incoming metaphors, here we go. So when I think about the brain, I think very much in metaphors, and I thought this was a really fun way to think about it for this specific training. And so when you think about the brainstem, that is the most primitive first structure in our brain to develop. And so I want you to imagine the brainstem as the rhythm section of a rock band. There's that pulsating beat and solid foundation that really sets the tempo for the entire performance. So AKA, in the brain stem regulates basic life functions like heartbeat, your breathing and respiratory system, your GI system, etc. And it really provides essential rhythm for the brain's rock ensemble, right? Like it is innate, it happens automatically because we have to be able to live just organically. So then moving into the midbrain, we're thinking about the limbic system. And I kind of equate that to emotional strings, right? It's the feeling epicenter of the brain. So picture the limbic system as like harp strings or any sort of like melodic string section that kind of weaves melodies that evoke feelings and responses throughout the band. AKA, the limbic system is responsible for emotions and our long-term memories. This is why we talk about core body memories when we're thinking about infancy and early toddlerhood. When kiddos are pre-verbal, the body keeps a score, right? Like we do remember. It just doesn't look like you would think it does. And so the limbic system really adds emotional depth to our experiences, like the strings in a rock band. And then last but not least, we're thinking about the cortical region, which is like the lead guitar solo. So think about the cortical region, your prefrontal cortex, which is the last thing to develop, the front part of your brain. It takes even longer for the men to come to age at like 25 plus, the prefrontal cortex oversees higher cognitive function, like decision making, planning, all those executive function skills I talked about, problem solving, and short-term memory. And so this is why people with anxiety a lot of the times have a really hard time with like memory and recall and oh my gosh, like it's just, I cannot get there. It's that because our brain kind of goes offline when we're anxious, when we're worried about something, because we are in protection mode, because we are trying to come up with a plan, right? And so the lead guitarist really steers the band around thoughts and actions. So the key message here is really trying to be able to understand the brainstem, the limbic system, and the cortical region to really understand how they piggyback off of each other. And then it really provides an explanation for behavior when we're thinking in these more concrete terms and where things come from, where they originate, what's the root. So let's talk attachment. Babies are fully dependent on caregivers to survive. It's partly the reason they're so cute and smell good, literally, biologically, so we don't kill them. They have to like incentivize us to want to take care of them. And we need to build attachment with an adult so they can meet my needs and I live. A common misconception out there is that attachment like lives with the child, but that's not the case. Attachment doesn't live with the child or the caregiver, but it really lives in the space in between. So like I put a heart here on the little graphic, which is us being together in this very vulnerable space where co-regulation happens. And so the space where co-regulation happens consistently or doesn't impacts how I connect with other people or don't. And there are 4 attachment styles, but I really just want to kind of highlight how it's built here and contrast a couple so you can see what the difference is. But attachment is built through physical proximity, which is like a pet peeve of mine when we're in child welfare. I think that is a very common misconception as well. People don't really understand how attachment is built, and it happens when I am physically coming to meet your need and help you co-regulate through felt safety. And so you can also have different attachment styles with different caregivers, which is super important to think about when you think about challenging behaviors, right? And so in this graphic, baby has a need, baby cries, they're pre-verbal, can't communicate any other way. I hear you, oh, baby's crying, they need either fed, changed, snuggling, they need something emotional. whatever the case might be. I'm reinforcing the message of like, when you call, I will come. And that happens over and over and over and over, hopefully, in a secure attachment. So the core belief that that child develops is I can depend on people. I am safe and the world is safe, and that I can rely on other people. In contrast, I'm not going to get too in the weeds of this, but just contrasting an anxious attachment style. Same thing. Baby has a need, baby cries to get that need met, but we don't have a predictable caregiver. We don't have a caregiver that we know is going to come consistently. We don't know what caregiver I'm going to get today. And so the caregiver is sometimes responding. It's not super predictable. And the core belief that develops is, well, I can't rely on other people. Obviously, if my person won't even come, I have to be super hyper independent to get my needs met. Or I have to get really creative on how I get my caregiver to connect with me, which a lot of the times is where big baffling behaviors come, because even if I'm getting a negative connection with my person, it is better than not having any connection at all. So there is that. Think about that when you're thinking about roots. Attachment style is really important. And as a side note, there is a difference between an attachment relationship with someone and a kiddo just viewing someone as familiar. So unless that caregiver is there pretty much 24/7 or very frequently, I might like recognize you, but that does not mean that I am depending on you for my felt safety. So, as we've explored this orchestral masterpiece of brain development and the central role of relationships, let's now kind of turn our attention to the art of teaching self-regulation in the earliest stages, which is really co-regulation. So just like the conductor kind of guides the orchestra with finesse, right? Caregivers and providers play a vital role in nurturing the self-regulatory capacities that will eventually harmonize the unique melody of each child's journey. So, regulation is kind of like going up and down on a teeter-totter with whatever life is throwing at us. And dysregulation is like slamming down one side. So connection versus protection. So bringing back to center, sometimes the weight on one side is a little bit heavier, so the caregiver on the teeter-totter might have to slide towards the back to start to balance, or might need to start sliding to the middle to balance. This is co-regulation. Co-regulation looks like adjusting on the teeter-totter to account for the child's weight. We adjust to meet where they are and help their balance, because eventually, hopefully, they won't need another person to do that. But in infancy and early childhood, they really need the caregiver to be on the teeter-totter, or they'd be up flying in space. And so Robin Goebel, a very, very good LCSW, I will link her for you guys, so succinctly says, it's our job to offer safety to others, but it's their nervous system's job to decide whether it's going to accept it or not. All we can do is manage our own regulation, which we'll talk a little bit more about as we're wrapping up. So, when the brain is flooded with emotion, the cortex, front part of our brain, goes offline, and the limbic system, that feeling center, is in control, right? We are in our big feelings, meltdown, tantrum city, whatever you want to call it. So our lid is flipped of sorts, and emotion kind of takes the front seat. Logic goes out the window, and you all know you cannot reason logic with a toddler. I would challenge you to try. You will not win, even if you think you win. When this happens, kiddos this young literally cannot access the language center of the brain towards the front to tell you what's wrong or what they need. And so you're just stuck in this very vicious loop, not getting anywhere. And so this is where you really have to take a step back and think about it, which I recognize is really hard to do in the moment. So welcome to the party. All behavior is connection seeking. even if it doesn't look like it. And so I hate reading off of a slide. I'll just kind of leave this here, but point out a few things because I just love all of these points. Emotions in childhood are explosive and changeable, right? Especially when we're growing up into toddlerhood, we're getting a more little autonomous, independent. We are more expressive with our feelings. So you know when I'm PO'd, you know when I don't like something, I'm going to show you. But it's changeable, and so are behaviors too. Discipline should be thought in terms of teaching or mediating versus reprimanding, trying to control, or punishing. We always want to lean into prevention, but sometimes that's just not the case. We can't prevent, it has already happened, so we have to really just focus on the repair. And kids act out and seek equilibrium and co-regulation when they experience disequilibrium. And so that is when I need a caregiver to come sit with me, help co-regulate. Crying is actually a tool that helps us come back to equilibrium, right? We've all heard the saying, like, you just need a good cry sometimes. Like, that's what they mean. So I scream, you scream. Why are we all screaming? Behavior. We really have to slow down, pause, and look at what's underneath. So it's time to put on the detective hat that I mentioned when we first started. So I'm allowed to have big feelings as an adult, and society almost expects these kinds of responses from me, but not from tiny humans who are still working on it. That's a super big double standard, right? Like I blush even looking at this list because like I'm not like a fighter, like I've never been in a fist fight, but like you can believe I have done a lot of these other things. Not proud, real life, right? But like kiddos who are tiny humans do not get the same gracious extension of like, I get it. So we really have to start there too. So let's talk about big feelings in tiny humans. Robin Goebel also says that challenging behaviors stem from a lack of felt safety in one or more of these areas: inside, outside, or in between. And you know, typically we first think of safety as physical safety, right? Like we're sitting here in a room right now, hopefully engaged in this webinar, and there's no tornado coming, so we're safe, depending on where you are in Texas, okay? It's a weird weather day. But that doesn't always translate to physiological or psychological safety, because who knows what tornadoes we have in our past or our history that are actually informing what's going on right now in our body. So how do we recognize and respond to that? Well, we have to stay curious about the need behind the behavior. What is feeling unsafe? So let's walk through this. Inside is a little bit harder to conceptualize if you just don't think about it, but it's everything that's going on in the body, the organic stuff. So does this kiddo have a tummy ache? Are they just not feeling well? They've got a fever, they're cutting teeth. Maybe they have a limited attention span already and you're just like asking them to keep sitting. Are they tired, hungry, thirsty? How are their basic needs right now? How long has it been since they had a snack? Do they have a boo-boo or are they sore? Is there adrenaline pumping through their body because they're overstimulated, they're in fight or flight, or are they understimulated? That could also kind of vacillate between outside as well. So what's happening inside? Outside is a little more self-explanatory, right? So everything that is going on in the environment. So is there an unfamiliar situation or place happening that I haven't exactly been prepped for? Is the weather kind of ick? Is it too cold, too hot, too wet, too humid, very sticky? I am very, very sensitive to humidity. It is not my friend. Is there too much noise? Is there a specific smell that's triggering something that we don't know about? Is there sensory overload in general? But also, does this kiddo just really struggle with transitions? That's one that I would hear over and over and over and over. Transitions are hard. And in between, this is the little more gray area. This is the one that's a little bit harder to notice, but this is where you as providers really come in handy. So you have to think about attachment style and a few other things. So is there something going on in this relationship with the caregiver? Do we have an unpredictable caregiver like we talked about in the anxious attachment style? Do we have a caregiver that's not really providing consistent co-regulation because the caregiver is dysregulated? That is a lot of the times ambivalent and disorganized attachment styles. Is this caregiver just kind of like moody or not super kind a lot of the time? Is there like the typical abuse and neglect happening that people tend to think about? Is there parental depression, mental health stuff, substance use, coping for their own dysregulation happening? The caregiver is also someone we need to be holding space for and thinking about. Regulated, connected children who feel safe behave well. So I want you to keep that in mind. This is a very poignant statement that will always go back to felt safety. Where does this kiddo not feel safe and what can we do to intervene? I picked these pictures on purpose here, right? You got a dad in the kitchen with two tiny humans sitting on the floor. Is it ideal? No, but dad's nearby to check in with, right? Is dad keeping everyone safe? Yes. And this is probably a better scenario than having two little ones in a different room across the house, left to their own devices, unsupervised, right? This is when you have a toddler emerge covered in Vaseline. That has happened in one of my families before. Did not make that up. And then airports, I just think this is a given. And when I look at this picture, like I laugh hysterically because I'm like, as if in what world does this look like this, right? And so nightmare, what do you think about in terms of inside, outside, in between for the child and the caregiver? Airports are just stressful, like they just are. So what next? Well, in order to teach about what to do next time, we have to move kiddos from fight or flight back into their prefrontal cortex, from our lizard brain back to our owl brain. We have to connect before we redirect. So what do they need to feel safe again? This is when a caregiver being the expert of their child comes in. And providers here, this is when you have to lean into empowering the caregiver, or offer notes of your own observation if reflective capacity needs some scaffolding. That is also okay. Because very young children will not be able to tell you with words what's going on, but you could always offer options. And there are three things that we have absolutely no control over when it comes to tiny humans. We can't make them eat, we can't make them sleep, and we can't make them go to the bathroom. These three things are in their full control, and this is why these areas are oftentimes tested, right? Because with big baffling behaviors comes a need for control because it is protective. So any choices you can give to allow for more control while staying safe is going to give you more bang for your buck. Do you want to blow out candles or do dinosaur steps? Do you want mom to hold your hand or carry you when we cross the street together because it's freaking crazy? We're gonna go to Miss Lauren's class this morning. Do you want to read a book together or sing our goodbye song before I leave? And so again, freedom and choice, you're gonna get a little more bang for your buck, like I said. And whenever you have the capability to offer choices, highly recommend. Responding with empathy. This is extremely hard to do if it hasn't been your default or norm, and that's okay. This is hard for me. My parents did not ever respond to me with empathy. If you've heard me talk before, you've heard that I am a child of neglect. And so this capacity for me was a little bit challenging, but it's okay. Practice makes better. Empathy is something we learn in early childhood, and it is extremely intertwined with building attachment, trust, and felt safety. But we can't empathize if we're experiencing our own distress. So I'm in my feelings over here. I'm trying to survive this, so I can't be with you over there in your yucky feelings because like I can't. But there's hope. The more you are empathized with, the more you can build that capacity, because nobody is perfect and nobody's going to get it right 100% of the time. Like, that's just not real life. If like concrete script and role play and like the visual is helpful for you or is helpful for a caregiver that you're working with, Dan Siegel has some amazing illustrations of responding with empathy. You could literally just hop on Google or Pinterest and type that in, and so many different examples will pop up. Love that. And so let's talk through a routine. I, back in my early intervention home visiting days, had several times where bath time was really hard for everyone. Child screaming bloody murder, and it's just rough, right? Like, that's not fun for anybody. But we have to think, what about the bath does the child not like or not tolerate well? So I think a lot about, because this is the lens that I usually work through, which is trauma. I think a lot about kids in the child welfare system, kids that have now been moved to a relative or a foster parent. And so open water, right? Like, the size of a bathtub can be really intimidating for a kiddo that has maybe only had a bath in the sink or in one of those tiny bathtubs in the bathtub, or one of those flower petal things that you put in a sink. I can't remember what they're called. They're really freaking cute and they're so soft and sweet. Don't know what they're called, but I'm pretty sure you know what I'm talking about. So size and depth can be really scary. Noise of the faucet, that can set off a lot of kids. Is it just too loud? Do we need to start trying to put water in the tub and shutting off the faucet before we ever put the kid in? Temperature of the water, like, yeah, we need to figure that out, what kids like, don't like. Obviously, keep it safe. Is there a fear of water being poured over my head or in my eyes or up my nose or in my ears, right? The kiddos that have had chronic ear infections, oh my God, like, if I was them, I would not want anything poured over my head because the pain of an ear infection is unparalleled. And so of course I don't want water being poured over my head. That could just also be a sensory thing. Does bath feel like a chore or a punishment instead of playtime because it's just kind of a means to an end at the end of the night, and like, we're just trying to get through it. Like, I played really hard at childcare today, like, I'm dirty, like, we're running late, just got to get in the bath, go to bed. That's not fun for me. So like, that could be triggering as well, especially if I was already playing with something fun and now I have to go do this, which is not fun. That's empathy. Is this kiddo afraid of going down the drain? True story, look it up on the internet. This is also very true with kids that are potty training. It is a real, valid fear, and we've got to hold space for that and like wonder, right? Very concrete thinking. Or like, is the bath just an experience of me feeling out of control of my space and my body because my caregiver does these things to me and not with me? I don't have control over where I'm sitting, what I'm playing with, when they're going to pour water over my head, when I'm going to be spun around, when I'm going to be stood up to do wiping, like all of those things. Being out of control is very scary for young kids. It's scary for us as adults. So like, we've got to empathize there as well. This is what it takes to be more proactive. We have to learn, we have to adapt, and we have to practice, practice, practice. Yes, I recognize how politically incorrect this song is these days, but let's just focus on gathering more information. I also love that song. I'm sorry. It just is what it is. Renee, if you could drop the resource page link in the chat, that would be lovely. But these are some really concrete things you can try, whether you're a provider, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're both. These were things I used so much of the time throughout the years in early intervention and child welfare support. ABC charts are a great tool for seemingly random, unpredictable behaviors like fighting, tantrums. We're just trying to figure out where they're coming from. And all of these things really just give us a better starting place instead of throwing things at the wall and hoping they stick. ABC charts are a great way to find patterns, empower caregivers to find patterns, to figure out a certain time of day that things are happening. That was huge for me when I was working with parents. Is this happening around a transition time? Is this happening right before lunch or nap? Do we need to be moving our routines around so we can not wait 4.5 hours before we're offering a snack or something like that? It's a great way to learn how to be proactive. Calm down box is pretty self-explanatory. I've linked all of these things in the resource page for you guys, examples, lists, things like that. It's important to note here that caregivers should regulate before using this because it is not a punishment to be used when the adult is angry. You better stop fighting or I'm gonna go get that calm down box, right? Like that's not what we're doing. That literally undoes what we're trying to do in the first place. But this is just a toolbox, literally, of just random stuff you probably have around your house already to help you come back to regulation, back to being open to connection. So like bubbles, to do some deep breathing and blowing. This could be fidget spinners. This could be a weighted lap pad or blanket. We're getting deep pressure. This could be Play-Doh or slime because we're pushing and we're squeezing and we're getting that adrenaline out of our body. And this is just a great way to offer choices. Because again, anytime you can offer a choice, you're going to be better off. And it's important to do these things with the child so they are not doing all of this alone, because like we want to stay connected and provide that co-regulation. And then cozy corner or a gross motor space. This might be needed for a kiddo who's overstimulated to go in like a dimmer, quieter, softer space to just like be like, I just need to be away from all this stuff. But on the flip side, you might need a spot for just gross motor movement, because when we go into fight or flight, adrenaline starts pumping through our body to get us ready to run from the bear, right? And so kids need space to be able to jump, push, and pull things that are heavy, get that adrenaline out of their little bodies. This is why like sending someone to timeout is not super beneficial outside of the like disconnection emotionally, but also like we cannot expect kiddos that are in like tantrum mode to sit. Like that's just not a realistic expectation. So now very quickly, let's refocus on the caregiver. We cannot help kiddos co-regulate and teach regulation skills if we're not there ourselves. And kiddos can physically feel when we're stressed or when we're not in our best. We're not the best version of ourselves, right? Like they know when we're not feeling good or when we're mad or when we're having a bad day. They know. And this is super important. There is no such thing as a perfect parent. It literally doesn't exist. We're never going to be able to catch every single time a kid's trying to connect with us because we don't live in a bubble. But as long as you're responding to and meeting the needs of the child more often than not, secure attachment will develop between the kiddo and the caregiver. And so even when circumstances may damage the attachment relationship, there are skills that adults can learn to repair attachment over time, even if it's been a few years. I always let out a sigh of relief when I'm saying that, so I hope that you can breathe easier too. Like it's not doom and gloom. There's no like irreprehensible damage. And sometimes, honestly, in the tantrum cycle, there is a point where reasoning, talking, redirecting, cozy corner, ABC chart, calm down box, every trick up your sleeve does not work, will not work, because the tantrum has taken over. And you then just have to ride the wave of safety. And that's just going to be what it's going to be. So I want to show you a 1-minute video of repair in action. This is a TikTok. I've linked all the videos. I had to cut a lot of them for the sake of time today, but I love this video of repair and hearing how she is coming back to her child. And so throwing it up here, I'm going to keep it small so I don't lose my PowerPoint. And here we go. This is little Jonah, and she's talking about how she put those dot paint markers. He put one in his mouth.
When the boys were outside painting earlier, Jonah took the dot marker paint and put it in his mouth. I immediately had to grab him and rinse his mouth out over the sink, and he was crying, and this is the conversation that happened after.
I'm sorry that I had to grab you and rinse your mouth out with water like that. I know that you did not like that. You put paint in your mouth, and that can make you sick. I had to rinse it out of your mouth with water to keep you safe.
Okay.
Mommy doesn't ever like to grab you and do things without asking you or telling you first, right? When there is something that is unsafe, I have to do that to keep you safe. I know you were just trying to be silly, but we can't put things in our mouth that can make us sick. Do you understand? Okay. I'm sorry that I had to grab you like that, even when you were crying and saying no. I don't ever like to do that.
But take you up though.
Yeah, I had to pick you up and I had to lean you over the sink, and you did not like that, huh?
Yeah, no, that's it.
If you cannot be safe with paint, then you're not going to be able to use paint anymore, okay?
But
Can we eat paint?
no.
No.
So good. And like on that note, connection-based discipline doesn't mean kiddos are running around feral with no boundaries. I hear that all the time. It means that we are approaching them with humility, humanity, and dignity, and we're able to apologize when something triggered us. So in this case, it was safety, right? She didn't want them to get sick. She didn't know if they were non-toxic. And so we're able to admit when things are about us and not about them. It's our responsibility as adults to manage our own emotions, which is a really under-acknowledged form of generational wealth. Kids having caregivers who can do that. It's our responsibility to realize that a kid's behavior isn't personal. It's not about you. It's not about me. They are egocentric little humans who currently have the belief that the world revolves around them. So no, they are not trying to be malicious or spite you. I pinky promise. And co-regulation, let's circle back really quickly because it's been a buzzword of mine today. And so the number one myth about regulation is that to regulate means to calm down, which is not the case. It's not even the goal. That way of thinking sets us up to feel like we're failing or unable to experience healing. It's not all or nothing or fixed. Instead, to regulate means to connect, to be authentic and have mindful connection. And it enables us to think more clearly, make better decisions, connect to our breath, and feel more grounded. And for my providers, sometimes your role is about finding an entry point into the circle and thus becoming a part of the circle. In doing so, you have got to have some idea about the existing relationships for that child and how your role supports relationships so that when you step away, relationships will function without you. And scaffolding really is key to help building caregiver capacity. In infant mental health work, relationship is the client. And there's no overnight fix when it comes to behaviors, and you cannot come in and save the day. I really wish I had better things to tell you in that regard, but it takes time, it takes repetition, and it takes consistency. I know we're at the 45-minute mark. I have like a couple, like literally this is my next to last slide. So if you have to hop off, totally understand. I'm gonna finish though a couple things. This is super important and something I threw in kind of last minute, but Neurodivergent and traumatized children, particularly, continue to be disproportionately pushed out of the education system. We need time, funding, and resources to make every school or childcare center a psychologically safe place in which every child can, one, expect to be co-regulated with, as opposed to reprimanded and shut down during their dysregulated states. Two, better understand the complex link between their brains and their bodies. And three, ultimately to become confident at regulating their own emotions independently. But we can't expect a system to experience regulation when it's experiencing an unsafe situation. So really, dysregulation is the right response in any case that feels unsafe or unstable, even if the adult doesn't perceive the threat. There's generally a lack of confidence when it comes to seeking connection with the child due to overarching behavior management policies and tactics and like the handbooks and things like that. And our reflex reaction is to reprimand, right? But dysregulation is the right normal response. Perhaps if you're dysregulated in an unsafe or unstable environment, you are in fact appropriately regulated. A wholly expected nervous system response. So let's summarize. Craft your playlist from the foundational beats of Twist and Shout to the emotional chords of With a Little Help from My Friends. Children need experiences and time for unstructured play so they can explore and take risks and build relationships and experience joy and delight and build their brilliant brains. We have to sing the tunes of love and support and lead the band through the emotional ballads of Lean on Me and Imagine. We as the adults have to slow down and get curious about the need behind the behaviors that we struggle to manage and that they struggle to manage. It is our job to help steer the ship and hold space for these big, vulnerable feelings. And then embrace the dissonance, celebrate the solos of growth, and rock on through the evolving journey, inspired by the resilience and don't stop believing. It's our responsibility to manage our own emotions first and learn and practice the art of repair. So a couple takeaways when you're thinking about kiddos who have experienced early adversity, because that's usually my lens. The bad news is that maybe there's a tiny snapped ukulele or there's a broken drum set, right? Like we're operating out of fear, brainstem, or we just have unmanageable big feelings. These kiddos believe that they are not safe, and so the world around them is not safe. And so you have to keep that in mind when building these skills. But the good news is that research says it's possible to build attachment with kids once they are in a safe, loving relationship and environment. You just have to increase the activities that build trust. So it's possible to repair attachment. And then I'm going to leave you with this quote by Fred Rogers, R.I.P. We loved him. He said, "When I was young, about 8 or 10 years old, I was trying to learn so many things all at once. Things like the piano and organ and algebra and cooking and typing, and I even started taking clarinet lessons. But I just didn't practice the clarinet, so I didn't learn. I think I wanted to learn by magic. I think that I had the idea that if I got the clarinet, I would somehow know how to play it. But magic doesn't work with learning, not with anything really worthwhile. And so I want you to keep that in mind when you're thinking about navigating challenging behaviors and that it takes so much practice." And so here is the Baby Day survey in case you have not gotten to it yet, in case you want to get a head start on it. I hope you all have the best weekend and come see us at Baby Day across Texas tomorrow. Thank you so much, and I will kind of close there.
Thank you, Heather. That was an amazing session as always. I don't see any questions in the chat box, but for our last few minutes together, if you have any questions for Heather, go ahead and type those into the chat box now. I'll wait a couple seconds just in case people are typing. I did also want to read this comment though for you, Heather. Christina said you gave her some great pointers on why she's having issues at bath time with her 10-year-old autistic son. So I'm glad that Christina was able to grab some of those tidbits to utilize in her day-to-day interactions with her son.
Yay,
All
so glad.
Yes. All righty. I am going to wrap up here now. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat box. Again, I want to say thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a part of our virtual baby day celebration. And as we draw this day to a close, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to you for being here, for hanging in with us despite some of our technical difficulties today, and just being here to make sure this event is very special. And we also want to do a few things before we say goodbye. First, again, the survey is in the chat box. The QR code is also on your screen right now, so you can feel free to go ahead and complete that survey for us today. We really want to ensure that all of our future Baby Day celebrations continue to exceed expectations. So please just take a moment to give your feedback. It's very, very important to us. And secondly, for those of you who are eager to continue the celebration in person with us, we invite you to join us tomorrow at one of our 18 locations across the state. In the chat box, I have also placed a link to our Baby Day webpage where you can find all of our locations across the state and register to attend for tomorrow. If you have not registered, it is okay. You can also register on site in the morning, okay? We'll have a lot of sessions, a lot of activities and opportunities to connect with fellow parents, caregivers, and little ones. It promises to be a joyous occasion, and we can't wait to see you there. And lastly, but certainly not least, I want to express my deepest gratitude for our sponsors, HEB and the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, for their unwavering support to make Baby Day as special as it has been today. Thank you again for joining us today. Your presence and participation have made this Baby Day celebration truly memorable. Let's continue to cherish and nourish the incredible journey of early childhood together. We're going to say goodbye for now, but we will see you tomorrow at our in-person events. Thank you again.